Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. One of the reasons I'm drawn to the mystic tradition over the mainline religious tradition is because I'm wary of dualism. I believe when we fall into dualistic understandings of reality, it allows matter, which is a cruder form of experience, to dominate. That also means the mind dominates, because it's through the mind we understand matter. And that dominates the higher spiritual realms of life. It's why I believe the West has ultimately fallen. That's a topic for another time though. What I want to explore here is what this means in terms of our understanding of good and evil. Now, at the risk of upsetting some of the more mainline religious types, I do think the mystics are correct when they state that evil in and of itself doesn't really have a substance of its own. You know, in contemporary culture, we'll view good and evil as almost equal opposites. I don't think that's quite right. You could say through I think it's the Platonic or the Neoplatonic language, evil is a privation of the good. The implication therein is that by its very nature, being is good. Now, when we say being is good or existence is good, we don't mean it's good like a sandwich, or it's good that your football team won, or it's good because it feels nice. What we mean is that by its very nature, being itself is pure, it's true, it cannot lie, it is as it is. In fact, that's why many of us love animals so much. They can't lie, you know. Now, I know some of you might say, well, my dog, lies to get a treat and all of that. But there's a deeper level truth that functions through them. They're very pure in a sense, and that's one reason why we like them. But that will be a fragment of a deeper truth of being, if you like. It's why we orient ourselves, or at least claim to orient ourselves around the truth. I've spoken about it before growing up in Leicester. I remember, when a couple of chavvy girls would argue, I speak the truth, yeah, is what you'd hear. And it always struck me, why do we argue over the truth and who's telling it? Well, it's because we know in some implicit way, truth is our true food. As Christ said, we do not live on bread alone. But for the context of this video, for the context in our lives as men, understanding things through this frame aids us in dealing with the temptations of this life. Because all of us as men are going to be tempted by the worldly powers. And I think sometimes we can get stuck in a trap within a trap in this. Because let's say, we think a certain drug or a drink is going to satisfy us, or a job, or a possession, or whatever it may well be. We've all had that experience where we get that thing that we really want, and it works for a while, but eventually you realise, well, this isn't really it, and maybe we try and do that thing again. I remember I had a friend who was really into ecstasy. I used to work in a pub in London, and he was the chef. And he used to say, I keep taking it, but I can't get that first experience I had. It's like every time I take it, it's good, but it just lessens. And that's a perfect example. He touched literal ecstasy via taking ecstasy. And then all his life he's been chasing that ephemeral experience again. But his soul is trapped. It's looking in the wrong direction for its completion and trying to find it through worldly means. And of course, the more he takes ecstasy, the more damage he's doing to himself. The longer this goes on. That's a classic story of intoxicants. But like I say, this comes in many forms. It can come in, working to get that next possession, that next car. And then you get the car, but 6 months later you're like, I don't know, it's kind of worn off now. I want something else, New shiny thing syndrome. But through the frame, the mystic frame, it's quite different to the good and evil frame, because we could say in the more mainline frame, it would be something like, well, we're wrong for chasing the things of the world. That would be sort of a hardline religious take on it. And there is a lot of truth in there, but that truth has been distilled, I think, and it's somewhat, it's still penetrative in the religious teaching, but I think it's lost its heart, which for me and in my experience of life, I can only really explain through an example, which is something more like, it's not that it's this battle between good and evil. It's more the orientation of our soul back towards what it really wants. And instead of, while there does need to be a sacrificial element and a devotional and disciplinarian element, there also needs to be a compassionate element in dealing with the temptations of the world. And I really learned this in really being obsessed with a woman. I've spoken a lot about my late 20s. I really hit the wall. And in my early life, I had quite a damaged family life. Parents divorced, brother got mixed up in drugs, lost his mind, very scary, very violent. And it meant that I started to seek externals, to satisfy me, unconsciously, of course. I didn't know anything about God or spirituality, and even if I did, I don't think I would have been able to understand these ideas. Well, they're more than ideas, but we'll get to that. But the point I'm making is I sought, things in the world that could sustain me. I started with cannabis, smoked that every day with my friends. That gave me panic attacks. So I started drinking, And the drink worked much better for me because it sort of blocked out my reality to an extent. And then I got a girlfriend too. And I unconsciously at that time, very common for men these days because they don't have any spiritual structures or male elders, put a lot of my hope in that relationship with that woman. I don't have a family. It was my mentality. I did really, but I was so, broken by it. I felt very damaged and scared. I thought, I don't want to involve myself in that environment. So it'll all go in this girl. Now, it didn't work out with this girl. So long story short, I turned away from women for a bit as well, got interested in philosophy at university and drinking, and kind of became a bit of a recluse. But as I came out of my shell, I wanted to be a folk singer, which was another sort of trinket of the world, an identity I could cling to, which I thought would complete me. I also started to, hook up with women again, and slowly I sort of found my way, and then eventually down the line, I had a job in London, and then I met this girl, pretty blonde thing, and I was head over heels, Now, I didn't realise the same structure was playing out in my soul. Really, that wound had never healed. There was still that boy within that was seeking love and completion that can only truly be found in the Lord. Or if you don't like a religious language, we could say the indefinable source of being, if you like. Something like that. Love, you could say. Transcendent spirituality. Now, I ended up getting with this woman. There was a bit of trauma bonding going on. She'd had a hard time as well. But sooner or later, the relationship turned really toxic, and I became very needy. Because to me, losing her was like losing that first girlfriend and my family all over again, So I was so lost in her, I thought, I can't lose her, which made me needy, which put her off more because I was out of my masculine frame. And then it led to this horrible situation where I was stressed at work. I was going around London trying to hook up with other women to make it better, but as many women as I met, they could never match up to this one girl. Because on a soul level, I'd mistaken her for God, I thought she will complete me. And I'd survive on these drips of times that I'd see her. She was a bit older than me, more emotionally mature. I was about 28, she was about 33. And I was really lost in her, It was so powerful. And I'd see it briefly and think, we're back together. And then it would end and it was just constant up, down, high dopamine. Then the cortisol would kick in. And this went on for a year or two until it just broke me into shreds. I started drinking more, couldn't really, do my job. So I had to hit the wall with it. Now, when I hit the wall, I did have to realise, or really I was guided to, I'd say by the divine force, but also by some elders at that point, that I had to let go of her, as well as many other things. And it was very, very, very hard. But I did manage to do it. And I remember, actually, I didn't see her for months, and I'd moved on, kind of. And she got in touch, and I went over and slept with her on the other side of London that I was living on. And then that morning, I was trying to get home, and all the transport in London was down. I remember it was like a metaphor. I was like stuck in the past. So I walked through London. I remember being a bit, uneasy because I feel like I've gone back to this girl and it was so damaging before. And when I got on a bus, when the traffic started working again, it was, I know it sounds crazy to some of you who haven't had spiritual experiences, but it was like God himself reached down and was like, you can't give this sensitivity to her again. You just can't. And it was like I was given this gold back, Now, I wouldn't recommend sleeping with an ex to do that. I maybe got lucky. But I remember thinking, I cannot give this to a woman again. I just can't. It will eat me alive. Now, I believe it was divine guidance there. And I gave it to God. I remember on the bus just closing my eyes and saying, God, just have my soul. Like, just have it. Now, I'm not saying since that moment everything was perfect, but I've never been needy towards women again, ever. I'm inoculated against it now. I'm not inoculated against finding women attractive, but I'm inoculated in knowing that if I try and see them as fulfilling me, that they can fulfill ultimate love, it's a fool's errand and I'll pay. I'll go straight to hell, you know. And that lesson's been learned. But the point here is that I really want to emphasize in this video, it's not to try and be this, oh, look at how great I am. The reason I'm saying it is because I think we understand, you know, these challenges we have in life through, I've got to cut this thing off, you know. And it's going to be brutal because I'm going to lose the thing that I value the most, be it a woman, a drug, alcohol, a possession, the desire of who you want to be, you know, your status in the world, whatever it is. You know, we all have that thing that we value and we all have to sacrifice it on the real spiritual journey. But the point of the sacrifice isn't that we lose this wonderful thing that we love. It's that we realize what we loved was God all along. And it's not saying that this girl that I was completely lost in wasn't beautiful. She was a very attractive girl, beautiful blonde thing, lovely blue eyes. You could get lost in them. But what it was a fragment of the beauty of God as expressed through one woman. And I'd got trapped in that one fragment of beauty because of my male lust. And I couldn't see through it, you know, because I was so lost in the material mind and the senses, I couldn't let go and think, it's God's beauty which is working through the feminine form and appreciate it for what it really was, which meant I would be able to let go of it because I know that God's love can never fade, because God's love is always there, no matter what you've done, no matter how rotten you are. God's love is always there, you know. Those of you in the Christian tradition will know that God died for you. He loves you that much. Whether you view that literally or symbolically, it's true in my eyes. And the point therein is that we are held by God's love itself, but because we are drawn towards the material world, to matter through the senses and the mind, evil enters. And even evil itself isn't bad through this frame. Now, I know that might upset some people, but it's why C.S. Lewis said, it's the love of God that lights the fires of hell. The meaning of that is, hell doesn't exist in and of itself, because hell has no power. This is why many in the mystic tradition view Satan, whether you view him as literal or symbolic again, as a deceiver, because he has no power. He can't really do anything apart from deceive you. And it's up to us to believe the lie. So the point here is, it's not wrong to seek beauty in a woman. It's not wrong to seek status in the world, or to pursue your job, or to enjoy a drink if you can sensibly, you know. The point is to recognize that these things are ephemera. They're going to pass. They're not ends in and of themselves. They're fragments of beauty. But if we mistake them in our fallen self, in our ego self, you know, as the mind self, for that which can complete us ultimately, we're going to pay the price. And that's how evil enters. And this is where men do all sorts of dark things to try and win for themselves, to win the girl, to win the business, to have the most money, to have the status. This is where the darkness comes from. It all starts from that fundamental illusion that worldly things can satisfy us. Of course, this means that the true spiritual journey, which I think is the true masculine journey as well, is turning to the contemplative life. I think it was Evola who believes there's a heroic side to that, which you can go down, and there's a contemplative side. As you might imagine, I'm drawn to the contemplative side. But I do personally very much try and engage in the heroic side because I'm not a natural in that sense. It's why I often say I have to move towards the warrior. I have to go to the kickboxing class, the gym, the BJJ class, and listen and shut up and learn. Now, by all means, I'm not going to go to someone who's just a bully. You know, when you first embrace gym culture or kickboxing culture, you do meet these people. I'm not saying that. If they're, to be blunt, a bit of a dickhead, don't bother with them. But there are good people there. And if you stick around, you'll meet them. And if you ask them to teach you, they will take pleasure and pride in teaching you. And it really made me more whole as a man. But I'm always going to be drawn to the contemplative side ultimately because it's my nature. I just don't want to lose more of a whole masculinity by neglecting that other side. But the point I'm making is this is what we've lost not only as individuals, but what we've lost in the West. So we're always chasing money and ideas and all this stuff. Even the nation can be another illusion. I'm not saying these things are wrong properly understood, and they have different levels and layers on the hierarchy of how much of the divine they reflect. But none of them can reflect the true divine which can complete our souls. And that's what the spiritual journey, that's what life really is. It's the return to the ultimate good, which is within, you know. On the Christian journey, we have the beautiful capacity to make restitution when we make errors. You know, that's the atonement for sin. Acknowledging our sin and we are forgiven, but you have to acknowledge it, you know, and you have to make real repentance. It's not just some stupid thing of, oh, I'm sorry, fine. Sometimes repentance might take years for your soul to heal. But the point is, when we get lost in these things in life, we shouldn't say, it's just good versus evil. I've got to sacrifice this thing I love or think I love. No, you don't sacrifice love at all. You're getting more love in more abundance. It's just the recognition that the beauty that you felt was just one fragment of God's love, and you were fooled into thinking that it was going to complete you in and of itself. So while we might have to let the woman go, or the drug go, or the job go, or whatever it is, the love isn't going to go. That's going to be given more to you, more freely, because it flows naturally from the source of being, the heart of God. So I hope this helps somebody out there. I know this stuff really helped me when I was going through it. And I know it can be hard when we're losing these things. It can feel like you're dying when you have to let go of something. But really, it's just the soul that is trapped. And as always, if you need any help with this, do feel free to reach out to me. I would say engage in your tradition as well. Try and find the elders therein. But I do the coaching, which obviously drills down heavily on this. If you're interested in that, I may try and do another round by the end of the year. Do let me know if you're interested. There's also one-on-one stuff too if you're interested in that. Released a course recently as well. Do check that out down below. And other than that, do subscribe to the channel if you're new. Enjoy the rest of your day and do take care, brothers.